Good evening. Welcome to the first day of reading challenge. Earth. Earth. May the rainmaker water the earth mother that she may be made beautiful to look upon. Thus opens a prayer to Abitalin Sita, the earth divinity of the Zuni of New Mexico. The chant continues. May the rainmakers water the earth mother that she may become fruitful and give to her children and to all the world the fruits of her being that they may have food in abundance. May the sun, Father, embrace our earth mother that she may become fruitful, that food may be bountiful, and that our children may live the span of life, not die, but sleep to awake with their gods. Many North American people revered the earth and remained deeply impressed by its sacredness. In the first years of the 20th century, a Chayan explains to a visitor, "It is by the earth that we live. Without it we could not exist. It nourishes and supports us. From it grow the fruits that we eat, and the grass that sustain the animals whose flesh we live on. From it come forth, and over its surface run, the water which we drink. We walk on it, and unless it is firm and steadfast, we cannot live." Native Americans history, United States and Canada. North American indigenous peoples, Native Americans, are not the only people to speak of the earth with intimacy and emotion. Throughout history and across cultures, people have clung to their images of the sacred earth. It is worthwhile and necessary to come to grips with these images. In the first place, they reveal a reality that remains veiled in any other terms. Furthermore, the study of the images of the earth bears directly on our understanding of human condition as it has been plumbed by so much of the human family. In this article, we review several important aspects of the earth seen as a religious condition. Earth as the source of life, earth as it appears at the beginning of the time, the image of the earth as the primal mother, and earth as the locus of regenerative life. Source of life. The cosmos is a reservoir of sacred forces. From a religious perspective, the earth is the clearest epiphany of an ensemble of sacred apparitions. Soil, stones, trees, water, shadows, vegetations, and the jumbled landscape of the world. These form a single, living cosmic unity. The soil, the earth, signifies this tangle of concrete vitalities. The earth is the foundation, the generative source of every expression of existence. From the earliest records we possess of religious history, the earth united with everything else that it supports and contains all the life forms that reveal themselves to human beings. Earth is a tireless fount of existence. The lesson that the Chain man taught his visitor is that the religious meaning of the earth remains indistinguishable from all the life that takes manifest form through the powers of the earth, mountains, forests, water, vegetation, and so on. The creative role of earth in the beginning. A great number of myths described a distant time when the earth produced or helped create life in the world. Among the many mythic themes, we call attention to five: androgyny, parthenogenesis, hierogamy, sacrifice, and emergence. Androgyny, fullness of being. Androgyny is an ancient and widespread image of wholeness. Myths make clear that the meaning of androgyny goes beyond its overtly sexual manifestation to symbolize the perfection of a primordial, non-conditioned state of being. In fact, every beginning must start in the wholeness of being. Gods who manifested powerful aspects of the earth, especially divinities of vegetation and fertility, reveals traces of androgyny. These sources of holiness and power, such as Attis, Adonis, and Cybele, in the Mediterranean world portray the overfullness from which life springs. In cosmogonic myth, chaos often represents the perfect totality, the undifferentiated unity on which all subsequent existence bases itself. In such circumstances, the creative role of the earth is obscure but discernible. The earth exists in germ. Such is the such is the case in the Japanese text recorded in the Kojiki and Nihongi. In the beginning, heaven and earth were inseparably mingled together. This male and female principle formed a perfect and androgynous totality within an egg-like chaos. E- Eventually, a tiny amorphous island was precipitated out of the chaos. In this island was a reed, a development of the germ that first existed in the center of the cosmic egg. The reed was the first articulate transformation undertaken by the earth. It is generated a number of gods. Later, when heaven and earth separated definitely from one another, they took on the human forms of man and woman. The union of the two separate principles generated the world. When the woman died, giving birth to the fire god, the deities of local places, earths, and vegetation arose from her body. For the moment, we focus our attention on the first stage of creation and on the incipient androgynous being that embraces the sacred powers of the earth. These are not yet clearly defined, but they include all possibilities of life, such as the divine and androgyny in which the earth shares at the most primordial state of creation is the ultimate ground of the realities that follow. Parthenogenesis. According to Hesiod, Earth herself first of all gave birth to a being equal to herself who could overspread her completely. The starry heaven, who was to present the blessed gods a secure throne forever. This divine couple procreated the gods, the Cyclops, and slew of mythical monsters, arrogant children with 100 arms and 50 heads. Although Gaia finds no prominent place in the Homeric hymns, one of them is addressed to her. It is the earth I sing, securely enthroned, the mother of all things, venerable ancestress, feeding upon her soil all that exists. To thee it belongs it to give life to mortals and to take it from them. Ancient Greek traditions affirm that the earth existed before heaven, to whom the earth gave birth by parthenogenesis, that is, without any male assistance or insemination. For treatment of parthenogenesis among Greek and other Mediterranean goddesses, see Ubuntu Pestalozza. Through such myths, the power of the creative possibilities of the earth are portrayed as limitless. The motif of parthenogenesis by the primordial earth reappears in myths that account for all the species of animals and plants as having been born from the body of primordial being, as well as in myths of virgin birth such as the Greek accounts of Hera, who alone and unaided by men gave birth to Typhon. Hephaestus and Ares. Izanami, the Japanese goddess of the earth, gave birth to a number of gods who issued from her own substance. Hierogamy. Perhaps the perhaps the most lavish and numerous myths depicting the role of the earth in creation are those that describing a marriage between heaven and earth. A hierogamy. Myths of this sort are reported from Oceania, Indonesia, Micronesia, Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. When heaven encounters earth, life flows forth in innumerable forms. The union of heaven and earth is a fundamental act of creation. It generates life on a cosmic and biological scale. The Greek account about Gaia and the Japanese myths concerning Izanami show that the views of androgyny, parthenogenesis, and hierogamy are related and on occasion even overlap one another. All of these images, which are expressions of a coincidence of opposites, struggle to express the notion of creativity and of the cosmic feudality of the earth. In the beginning of time, according to Maori tradition, the sky, Rangi, and the truth, Papa were locked together in a sexual union. Their children longed for the light of day. In the eternal darkness of their earthen womb, they plotted a way to separate their parents. Eventually, the children severed the bonds that tied heaven to earth and shoved their father into the air until light appeared. According to Zuni accounts, the creator, Avana Vilona, contained all being within himself. At first, he existed alone in the universe, but then changed himself into the sun and produced the two seeds from his own substance. With this, he inseminated the waters. Under his warmth, the seed turned green and grew in size until it became the earth mother on the one hand and the sky father on the other. These cosmic twins embraces in union to produce the countless number of creatures. After many complications, the sun and the first ancestor he created managed to free the creatures germinating in the dark womb of the earth. Previously, they had crawled over one another like reptiles, hissing and spitting out in indecent words. Eventually, when the sky was lifted off the earth, these children escaped along a ladder to freedom and light. In myths of hierogamy, a sacred union with heaven, often symbolized by lightning, hail, or rain, is indispensable to the fruitfulness of the earth. It also serves as the model of fruitful human marriage. Hierogamy explains creation from some primordial whole that precedes it. The separation of heaven from earth is the first cosmogonic act, a fundamental sharing of primordial unity. In this widely known mythic drama, the fecundity of the earth with the heaven is noticeably absent or sparsely distributed among the people of Australia. Sacrifice. In some myths of creation, the earth appears as a primordial victim of destruction through conflagration, deluge, earthquake, petrification, especially through a sacrifice or even self-sacrifice. In such circumstances, the fertility of the earth is never suppressed, for from the immolated or dismembered remains spring the species of plants, animals, linguistic groups, or races of humankind. The mystery of the creation of edible plants through the sacrifice of a goddess of the soil or earth was reenacted through agrarian rituals. Most often, ritual sacrifices associated with the fertility of the soil were symbolic. In some cases, however, we possess reports of the actual sacrifice of living human victims. Such was the case, for example, among the Khons of early 19th century India. The Khon community, a Dravidian tribe inhabiting the hills of Orissa, a province of southern Bengal, brought a Maria, a voluntary victim who lived in the community for years, married and fathered children. In the days preceding his sacrifice, the Maria was ritually identified with the sacrificed divinity. The community danced in reverence around him. The victim was led in procession from the village to the virgin forest, the location of sacrifice. Participants anointed him and decorated him with the flowers. They called upon the earth god, Tari Pennu or Bara Pennu. O God, we offer the sacrifice to you. Give us good crops, season, and health. In front of representatives from every village in the vicinity, the Messiah was slain, and a priest distributed fragment of the sacrificed body. These pieces were brought to the villages and ceremonially buried in the fields. The remains were burned so that the ashes could be spread over plowed fields to guarantee a good harvest. In connection with the sacredness of the earth, the Aztec of central Mexico also performed acts of ritual sacrifice and dismemberment. When plants first sprouted, people sought the god of the maize, a new shoot that was brought home revered and furnished with the food offerings. That evening, the new sprout was carried to a temple. The goddess of maize was honored by three different female age groups. When the crop was ripe, the community celebrated a sacrifice in which a young girl represented Silonen, the goddess of the new maize. After the young woman was sacrificed, the new crop could be consumed as food. 2 months later, at the end of the harvest, another woman representing the goddess Tosi was beheaded in sacrifice. A priest wore the flayed skin of the victim. Another ritual specialist fashioned a mask from the victim's thigh. The masked participant played the role of a woman in childbirth in the harvest ritual. These sacrifices ritually repeat the creation scenario in which the violent death of primordial earth. Through flood, fire, or violent self-sacrifice, gave rise to a new forms, especially plants. Cut to pieces, the victim's body is identified with a mythic being whose death gave life to the cereal grain. Emergence. We have seen how the earth figures largely in the creation of cosmic structures, as well as plant and animal life. A large number of myths emphasize the role of the earth in the origin of human life. As mentioned above in the opening scenes of the Zuni creation account reported by Cushing, the solitary creator became the sun and impregnated the great water with the two seeds from his own substance. These gems of man and of other creatures eventually hatched in the darkness. Pushyanga, the great sage, then emerged from the formy body of the Earth Mother, who possessed four wombs, one on top of another. It was in the deepest of these womb caverns that all creatures dwelled in the beginning. For the first time, Pushyanga pleaded with the Sun Father to liberate humanity from the dank and crowded bowels of the earth. In order to deliver the forms of life from the obscure and indistinct conditions of its fertile matrix, the Sun Father began another round of creation. But this time he aimed to produce intelligent beings who could find their way out of the dark. Uterine hold of life and engendering earth, these beings would have the freedom that comes from the knowledge of magical power and ritual. For a second time, the Sun Father inseminated the foaming Earth Mother to produce twins. The twins sliced open the mountains and slipped into the subterranean darkness. With their warm breath, they hastened the growth of a climbing plant, enabling it to break through to the light above. They then fashioned a ladder from its dark, thus permitting the creatures to ascend from the lowest cavern into the second chamber. The beings who stayed behind or fell along the way became terrible monsters, creatures of the deep sea. Step by step, the twins provided the plant ladder to grow and led the earthly pilgrims toward open space and heavenly light. At each stage, the pupil grew in the wisdom and humanity multiplied along the way, filling up whatever space was made available in the earth by the twins. Eventually, the twin led out, one after another, six distinct groups of people, the ancestors of the six human races. They emerged on the surface of the earth, still bearing signs of their fetal existence in the ground. Their toes their toes were webbed and their ears, like those of bats and other creatures of the night, were attached to their heads by large membranes. They could not yet stand erect but crawled on their bellies like lizards or hopped like frogs. The Kaningas, Mohang, and Iroquois group also reported that humans once dwelled in the dark womb of the earth, without sunlight and in strange form. One day, during a hunt, one of the intraterrestrial accidentally discovered a hole that led to the surface of the earth. On the surface, this huntsman captured a deer. Drawn by the good tasting game and the fine countryside, the subterranean creatures decided to emerge into the light of day. Only the groundhog remained in the earth. Similarly, referring to the Lenni Lenape or Delaware Indians, the 19th century scholar John Hockwalder remarked that Indian mythologists are not agreed as to the form in which they existed while in the bowels of the earth. Some assert that they lived there in a human shape, while others with greater consistency maintain that their existence was in the form of certain terrestrial animals, such as groundhog, the rabbit, and the tortoise. These myths of emergence from the earth illustrate to what extent the earth is seen as mother. In fact, the gestation of the fetus and the act of parturition are viewed as recapitulations of the cosmic birth of humankind and the creation of life in general. When humans emerged from the deepest chamber of the earth, within the earth, humanity lived an embryonic existence. For that matter, all the forms of creation existed as embryos within the earth. All living beings passed through the various stages of development in a ripening process that has not yet come to completion. For that reason, the fruits of the earth reflect many different degrees of transmutation. Some Indian mineralogical tracts, for example, describe the diamonds as ripe, whereas crystal is unripe, and the emerald, still wrapped in its stone womb, is only an embryo. In the same way, base metals and unrefined ores they are not yet fully ripe. But human smiths and alchemists may imitate, hasten, and complete the powerful function of the each mother. The passage from the darkness of unconscious and preformal life to articulate form through emergence becomes a model for many human activities. When cultures wish to create something new, restore something worn, or regenerate a being, they reenact the pattern that was powerful enough to produce life in the first place. The act of procreation and birth of individual human being is in a culture is considered a reenactment of the primordial drama of emergence. The condition of the unborn child parallels the pre-existence of humanity in the womb of the earth. Every fetal child relives the primal experience of humanity through its signs, darkness, water, enclosure, larval form, etc. In the other words, because the emergence myth is known, cultures recognize that every individual possesses a first-hand experience in the entire significant history of humanity. The human mother and her fertile power are brought completely within the compass and sacredness of the great Earth Mother. Thank you.